If you woke up today feeling lost, directionless, with the impression that no matter how hard you try, nothing falls into place, then I want to talk to you right now. Because there is one principle, just one, that can completely transform the course of your life, your mind, and your results. And that principle begins with a single decision: putting God first. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about structure. I'm talking about a gravitational center that aligns everything around it. Because the chaos, confusion, and anxiety that consume you today are born from the internal disorganization of a system without a clear center. And a system without a center collapses. Whether it's a factory, a company, a family, or a mind. The day I understood this, my life stopped being driven by blind effort and started operating with purpose. I discovered that, just like on an assembly line where every part needs to be in its place for the engine to work, the human soul also needs an axis. And that axis is God. You can try everything. You can read all the books, follow all the gurus, test all the methods. But as long as you are your own center, you will be your own limit. Because human beings, on their own, are fragile, oscillating, unstable. But when God is the center, everything revolves with stability. That is the difference between operating with strength and operating with direction. You see, in my early years of work, I believed that I could build everything with effort, sweat, and engineering. And for a while, I was able to move forward. But there was an emptiness, an anguish that could not be resolved with more productivity. I felt that something was out of place, even when everything seemed to be working. It was at that moment that I realized I was trying to build a cathedral without a spiritual foundation, because every strong structure needs a solid foundation. And there is no foundation more solid than a higher purpose, a moral compass, an ideal that transcends the ego. And that ideal, for me, has always been God. When you put God first, it's not that problems disappear. It's that they get organized. The pieces of life start to fall into place. Your decisions become clearer. Your mind calms down. Your focus aligns. Because you are no longer trying to be everything, you become an instrument of something greater. And here's an industry secret that few realize. The more standardized and centralized production is, the more fluid it becomes. The same rule applies to your life. The more centered on God you are, the more fluid your life becomes. Because He becomes the axis of all the gears. Do you want to transform your reality? Then stop looking for shortcuts. Start at the center. Before you want to change your job, your home, your body, or your finances. Align your soul. And aligning your soul begins with a practical choice. Every morning when you wake up, before anything else, stop. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And declare, Lord, you are the center of my life. Lead my steps, guide my decisions. May my mind, my time, and my work honor you today. Do this for 7 days. Just 7. And watch what starts to happen. The way you react changes. Your patience increases. Your mind slows down. Your focus sharpens. Because where there is God, there is order. And I tell you with all certainty, God is not a luxury for moments of despair. He is a structure for moments of construction. Because when you are building something solid, you cannot depend on emotions. You need principles. And God is the principle of principles. Many people try to bring order to their lives with planners, goals, routines, but leave their souls in disarray. That's like trying to fix an engine without aligning the main shaft. It won't work. It may run for a while, but it will break down. Have you ever noticed how people with true faith have a peace that surpasses understanding? That's not magic. It's spiritual engineering. They have built a structure where the center is unshakable. And everything around it may sway, but it doesn't collapse. That's why I insist. Real success begins with a spiritual foundation. And make no mistake, it impacts your productivity, your leadership, your relationships, and even your financial results. Because a leader with spiritual clarity conveys confidence. An entrepreneur with solid values builds sustainable businesses. A professional with purpose works with excellence. I've seen it happen dozens of times in my own factory. Simple workers who put God first became the most productive, the most reliable, the most respected. And it wasn't a coincidence. It was a consequence. The modern world pushes you toward performance, toward rushing, toward shortcuts. But true prosperity isn't a race. It's alignment. It's not quantity. It's direction. It's not desperate effort. It's purposeful execution. You need to understand this. Everything you want starts inside you. But nothing can be sustained if what's inside is disorganized. And the best way to organize your inner self is to surrender control to the Creator. When you recognize that God is the center, you step out of the role of controller and into the role of builder. And that changes everything. You stop carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You learn to trust, to listen, to follow higher instructions. And just like on any production line, when each part fulfills its role, the final product is flawless. So tell me, what is the first thing you do when you wake up? Do you grab your cell phone? Do you think about your problems? Do you start your day on autopilot? That is a serious operational error. You are starting your day without aligning your axis. And then you don't understand why everything goes wrong. Starting today, change that. When you wake up, align your center. Don't start your day running. Start in silence, in prayer, in listening. Because believe me, when God comes first, everything else falls into place. You may think that all this sounds very nice in words, but you ask yourself, how can I apply this in the midst of the chaos I'm living in? With overdue bills, broken relationships, emotional exhaustion, and a job that no longer makes sense? And this is where I answer you with industrial firmness. You don't fix a broken factory by starting with the roof. You start at the base, at the ground, at the foundation. And your foundation is spiritual. It's not about religion. It's about structure. It's about soul engineering. God first is not an abstract concept. It is an operational decision that manifests itself in every choice, every word, every attitude. When you define that center, everything that is out of place begins to reveal itself. And that's good, because you can only fix what is visible. You can only adjust what has been revealed. But be careful. Putting God at the center does not mean waiting for everything to magically change. That is not faith. That is illusion. Real faith is movement based on conviction. It is working as if everything depends on you, and praying as if everything depends on Him. In my life, I never waited for a sign from heaven to start working. I woke up early, studied the processes, reviewed the numbers, analyzed the mistakes. And always before entering the factory, I would stop for a few minutes in silence and say, Lord, may everything I do today be useful, fair, and productive. That simple phrase gave me the clarity to make decisions that shaped the future of millions of people. Because when God is at the center, you develop a different sensitivity. You perceive invisible connections. You anticipate risks. You identify waste that no one else sees. You begin to see the world through the lens of creation, not confusion. And here's another hard, but necessary truth. You must learn to remove everything that competes with God in your mind, because a mind that serves many masters is a divided mind. And where there is division, there is noise. Where there is noise, there is lost productivity. And where there is lost productivity, there is suffering. Your mind needs to be clean, focused, directed. And that cleansing begins with a radical decision. To stop feeding thoughts that do not originate in goodness, truth, and peace. How do you expect to produce solid fruit if you plant seeds of fear, doubt, resentment, and guilt every day? Do you want to see your life fall into alignment? Then start by clearing the mental ground. Replace I can't with God, all things are possible. Replace it will never work with all things work together for good to those who believe and work with purpose. You don't have to understand everything, but you do need to decide who is in charge, you or Him. In my journey, I have learned that putting God first is not a ritual. It is an ongoing operation. It's like keeping the production line calibrated. If you get distracted, mistakes pile up. If you stop checking, the defect repeats itself. That's why, every day, without exception, you need to realign yourself internally. Do you want prosperity? Then start by obeying the principle. Everything that is prosperous in the natural world was first obedient to a higher order. The seed that germinates, the engine that runs, the company that grows, the body that heals. Everything follows a pattern. And the pattern begins with God, but that requires humility. And humility is the foundation of all lasting transformation. Because as long as you think you can solve everything on your own, God doesn't come in. He doesn't compete with your ego. He doesn't force his way in. He waits to be invited. And this is where most people fail. They confuse faith with pride. They think that believing in God means demanding that everything work out in their time, in their way. That's not faith. That's control. And control is the greatest enemy of true productivity. When I finally understood that I didn't need to control everything, that it was enough to do my part with excellence and leave the rest in the hands of the Creator, my mind was set free. My business prospered. My health improved. My relationships healed. Not because everything became easier, but because everything began to make sense. And when something makes sense, you can endure any difficulty with steadfastness. Think about it. How many days of your life have you wasted trying to control the uncontrollable? How many sleepless nights trying to solve what only time and divine wisdom could solve? Now reflect. What if you put God first before every decision, before every difficult conversation, before every action in your business? The answer you seek is not in the next technique, the next video, or the next course. It is within you. And it reveals itself when you align your mind with the Creator. Do you know why? Because you were not made to operate alone. No gear works outside the system. No component works outside the engine. And neither do you. You were made to operate in alliance, in harmony, in cooperation with something greater. And here is the essence of life. What is outside can only be ordered when what is inside is aligned. And that alignment begins when you, with humility, courage, and intention, say, I no longer want to be the center. I want to live for something greater. I want to operate from within the truth. God, take your place. And then, my friend, get ready. Because what will happen in the coming days will be more than coincidence. It will be consequence. When the center aligns, the system responds. When the soul aligns, life responds. Do you want a miracle? I tell you with all certainty, the greatest miracle is when your mind gets organized. When your energy stops dispersing itself in 1,000 concerns and begins to be directed toward building something solid. That is an industrial, emotional, and spiritual miracle. And that mental organization begins with a simple and non-negotiable principle. God first. I'm not talking about being religious or repeating memorized phrases. I'm talking about making God your decision-making parameter, your criterion for choice, your first thought of the day, and your last when you go to bed. When this becomes real, you realize what used to make you anxious now strengthens you. What once seemed impossible now becomes just a project with deadlines and processes. Faith, when applied correctly, is the greatest productivity tool there is, because it eliminates internal noise. And the greatest enemy of execution is noise. Duplicate thinking, hesitation, doubt. And when you eliminate doubt, your yes becomes yes, and your no becomes no. That's productivity. That is personal authority. That is what I call applied spiritual engineering. Have you ever watched how machines work? No gear argues with another. No belt tries to change its function in the middle of the process. Each part fulfills its function with precision. And that is why the whole operates in harmony. Human life was created with this same principle. Each with their role. And the main role of each of us is to recognize the center. God is not a part of the system. He is the entire design, the energy, the origin, the end, the reason. That is why every time you disconnect from Him, your life collapses. Because you try to operate a machine without energy, without a manual, without direction. And here comes the point that almost no one talks about. Putting God first requires discipline. It's no use starting your day with a prayer and then living as if He didn't exist. That's religiosity, not transformation. What changes your reality is making faith an operational practice. Decision by decision, word by word, expense by expense, relationship by relationship. What a practical example? Look at your bank account. Where you put your money clearly shows where your heart is. The Bible says so, but any manager also knows. Your budget reveals your priorities. And if God is first, your use of money should reflect that. The same goes for time. Do you want to? Align yourself with God? Then look at where you spend your time. Who controls your schedule? Who dictates your pace? If it's fear, haste, or ego, then God is not yet at the center. Because where he reigns, there is order, there is clarity, there is peace. You may be in the midst of a crisis, but within you, there is steadfastness, and that changes everything. Because a man or woman grounded in God is unshakable. They build even when everything around them is crumbling. They stay focused even when the world goes crazy. And you know what else? They prosper. Because true prosperity is the fruit of practical obedience to right principles. And the first of those principles is, start in the center. Start with God. I have never seen one of my employees who put God first be irresponsible at work. Quite the contrary. They were the most punctual, the most dedicated, the most committed to excellence. Because they knew they were serving something greater than a paycheck. They understood that work is a form of worship, that productivity is spiritual, that punctuality is an honor, that dedication is an expression of faith. And that is why they were promoted, respected, and imitated. I never built a factory to be just efficient. I built it to be a model of how spiritual order can bring about social transformation. I paid good wages not out of charity, but because it was fair. It was divine. It was the right thing to do. And when you do the right thing, the result is inevitable. But the opposite is also true. When you fake faith, when you use God as a slogan and not as your center, everything collapses. Because God does not manifest himself where there is hypocrisy. He works where there is truth. And the truth, my friend, is that you need him more than you need money, likes, or recognition. You can fool everyone, but you can never fool the Creator. And that's why true success only comes when there is alignment between who you are on the inside and what you do on the outside. And if today you're tired of trying to pretend that everything is fine, I invite you to stop, to breathe, to surrender, to return to the center, not as someone who has failed, but as someone who has finally understood. Because only the strong have the courage to admit that they need God. The weak pretend to be self-sufficient. The strong surrender and build with him. And building with God is the most powerful thing there is. Because what he builds, no one can tear down. What he aligns, no one can mess up. What he sustains, no one can destroy. So the question that remains now is simple and definitive. Who is at the center of your life? If it's still you, then we already know where the limit is. But if from now on it's him, then there will be no more limits. There will be purpose. There will be direction. There will be solid construction. And when that happens, you will look back and realize that it wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was alignment. It was a decision. It was God first, and the rest falling into place around that truth. Some say that putting God first is a matter of faith. It is, but it's also a matter of strategy. Because faith, when well directed, is the most powerful engine of human action. Without faith, you freeze in the face of obstacles. With faith, you build bridges over chasms. And here is one of the greatest lessons I have learned in decades of hard work and industrial engineering. There is no sustainable progress without a solid moral center. Do you know why? Because in the end, everything you build will be tested. Your ideas will be challenged. Your businesses will face crises. Your emotions will collapse. And in those moments, what keeps you standing is not your resources, but your foundations. Have seen many men smarter than me break down. Men with degrees, with money, with connections, but without a center, without purpose, without a core, because they built tall buildings on unstable ground. And I say to you with all clarity, the most stable foundation in the world is God, not the God of rituals, not the God of ready-made phrases, but the living, real, present God who guides every decision, every action, every choice. Do you want to grow? Start by laying this foundation. Do you want to lead people? First, learn to be led by God, because true authority comes from submission to principle. And here's another truth. When God is at the center, you become trustworthy. And trustworthiness is the most valuable currency in the modern world. People today are thirsty for strong leaders, for partners with integrity, for living examples of consistency. And you will only be that example if your life is aligned with something greater than your own interests. That's why spiritually aligned leaders build solid businesses. They don't decide based on impulse. They evaluate. They listen. They pray. They act responsibly because they know that every action has eternal weight. And that brings peace. It brings authority. It brings direction. You see, the world is collapsing because it is trying to function without a center. It's like trying to run a factory without power, without logic, without a schedule. Everyone for themselves. Everyone chasing their own desires, as if that were freedom. That's not freedom. It's chaos. True freedom is knowing who is in charge of you. Freedom is submitting to what is good. It is obeying a greater plan. It is aligning your agenda with what really matters. And here is a point you need to understand urgently. Your agenda is your altar. What occupies the center of your agenda is occupying the center of your life. And what occupies the center of your life is shaping your identity. You can say whatever you want with your mouth. Your routine reveals who you are. You can say, I believe in God, but if he doesn't show up in your routine, you don't believe. You're just repeating a phrase. Because faith without practical expression is ineffective. And everything that doesn't work dies. This is what I've learned over time. Faith that doesn't translate into work is vanity. And work that isn't grounded in faith is suffering. It is at the intersection of these two pillars that life begins to make sense. You work like a giant, but with your heart in it. You perform with excellence, but without arrogance. You grow, but you remain grounded. And that, my friend, is what sustains a lifetime. So don't underestimate small habits. They reveal what's at the core. The way you start your day. The first words you say. The intention with which you answer someone. The reason why you do what you do. All of this screams who is in charge. And when you put God first in a practical way, your perception changes. You begin to see what no one else sees. You identify invisible opportunities. You sense problems before they arise. Because the spirit that guides you is also what protects you. That's what saved my company from bankruptcy. Several times, I didn't just rely on projections. I relied on principles. And those principles came from my connection with God. And here's another key. Do you want to see your productivity skyrocket? Align your soul before you open your email. It's that simple. Before responding to any message, align your mind with what is right. Before making any decision, ask yourself, does this honor the truth? Does this build up or tear down? Does this bring me closer to God or further away? This is faith in action. This is productive spirituality. Because at the end of the day, God doesn't just want your worship on Sunday. He wants your heart on Monday, your focus on Tuesday, your patience on Wednesday, your integrity on Thursday, your service on Friday, your gratitude on Saturday. He wants to be the center of the process, not just the end of the prayer. And when you allow that, your life changes. Not because it gets easier, but because it becomes clear. You stop fighting the current. You stop swimming in contradictory directions. You get into the right flow. And everything around you starts to fall into place. The external chaos loses its power in the face of internal peace. And it is in that peace that you build great things. That's how I turned a small workshop into one of the largest companies on the planet. It wasn't magic. It was principle. It was order. It was faith applied as a structure, not as an excuse. Now, I ask you with all the authority of someone who has lived what he preaches. Are you willing to reorganize your life based on this axis? Or will you continue trying to be the center of something that was not meant to revolve around you? The decision is yours. But know this, the prosperity, clarity, and steadfastness you seek so much are already available. All you have to do is step out of the center and allow God to take his place. Have you ever tried to fix a system without turning it off first? Trying to reorganize your life without first recognizing what is out of place is like trying to fix an assembly line with everything still moving. It will hurt. It will cause more damage. And it will be costly. That's why the first step to putting God at the center is to stop. Stop running without direction. Stop pushing tasks that you don't understand yourself. Stop accumulating commitments that have no purpose. You need a moment zero, a restart point, a pause to turn off the old system and turn it back on with new programming. And the new programming begins with this immutable truth. Everything that is true, eternal, and productive is born from a well-defined center. That's how I transformed. Automobile manufacturing. While the world was making cars as works of art, each one unique, I realized that the strength lay in standardization, in alignment, in the common center. And that was only possible because I had already understood this truth within myself. God is the most stable standard there is. When you operate from Him, you don't need to invent far-fetched solutions. You just execute what has already been determined. That's not limitation. That's freedom. Because the true leader is not the one who creates the most ideas. It's the one who executes the right principles with excellence. And here's the point. God didn't call you to be brilliant. He called you to be faithful. Faithful to the purpose. Faithful to the call. Faithful to the truth. Faithful to the work. Faithful in the details. Brilliance, when not anchored in faith, turns into pride. And pride is the ruin of any system. But faithfulness builds. It sustains. It strengthens. And you can only be faithful when you know where your center is. Who is in charge? What order guides you? Have you ever seen how an assembly line works? It doesn't question what's coming. It's programmed. And that programming ensures that everything flows at the right time, in the right place, with the right result. Life with God is like that. You don't need to understand every step, but you need to trust the programmer and obey the rhythm. Because when you try to speed up on your own, you cause overload. When you try to change direction, you cause a collision. And when you try to operate without power, everything stops. You have been operating without power. I see it in your eyes, in your tiredness, in your confusion. And the only source of energy that sustains the journey of solid and productive construction is applied faith. Not a faith of words, but a faith that manifests itself in attitudes, in habits, in routine. Start your day with God. Work with focus. Honor your schedule. Take care of what is yours. Serve with joy. Plan with purpose. And when you make mistakes, because you will make mistakes, correct them with humility and start over. This is spiritual productivity. This is practical faith. Do you want to change your life? Then review your operation. What commands have you been following? What values guide your decisions? What goals have you set? And most importantly, who are you building for? You need to be clear about this. Because if you don't know who you're building for, you're building in vain. I never built cars just to sell them. I built freedom. I built dignity. I built access. And that is what God wants you to understand. What you do is only the means. The end is always greater. It is always eternal. It is always for Him. This change in perspective transforms you from within. And what is transformed within inevitably manifests itself on the outside. You begin to attract opportunities you didn't see before. You begin to create connections that weren't available before. You begin to make decisions with conviction. You begin to work with joy, even when everything outside seems to be falling apart. Because your source is no longer outside. Your source is now the Creator, and He does not dry up. He does not fail. He does not collapse. But you need to choose to operate in this system. God does not force. He invites. And maybe today, right now, that is the invitation He is extending to you. Not to give you a new religion, but to give you back your structure, your direction, your purpose, your steadfastness. Are you tired of starting and stopping? Tired of depending on motivation that disappears in 2 days? Tired of chasing techniques that only work until the next problem arises? Then stop, breathe, be still, and reorganize everything. Based on this principle, God first, and everything else will fall into place. You can do this right now. You don't need the perfect environment. You don't need a ritual. Just close your eyes and say, Lord, I surrender. I acknowledge. I give up. I need you to be the center. My center. And after that, get up and go to work. Go build. Go organize what needs to be done. But now, under new leadership, with new energy, with a new mind, because from the moment God takes center stage, you are no longer just another person trying to survive. You become a builder of eternity. You've come this far. And that's already a sign that something inside you is awakening. Because only those who are ready to change their lives listen to the end. The others give up at the first sign of discomfort. But you stayed, you listened, you understood. And now it's time to decide. Yes, decide. Because all this knowledge, all this clarity, all this direction are worthless if you don't take action now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Decide to reorganize your life around God. Decide to put Him at the center not only of your prayers, but of your actions, of your words, of your finances, of your schedule, of your time, of your silence. You don't have to change everything overnight, but you do need to change your center. Because when the center changes, everything around it begins to reorganize itself around that new axis. And here's something no one has told you. It's not the size of your problem that paralyzes you. It's the absence of a stable center that turns it into a project. You see, chaos only reigns when the mind doesn't know where to start. And when you put God first, He shows you the next step. And more important than knowing everything is knowing what to do now. And now, my friend, it's time to get up. Get up with authority, with applied faith, with clear vision, with a steadfast heart. Because this is not just a journey of inner transformation. It is a complete re-engineering of your life, of your productivity, of your routine, of your future. Starting today, you are no longer a confused executor. You become a leader of your own destiny, not because you have all the answers, but because you have the source of the answers within you. I've seen it happen to thousands of men and women throughout my life. Ordinary people, workers, business people, broken, indebted, directionless people, who decided to start over with God at the center. And in a short time, everything changed. Businesses flourished, homes were restored, bodies were healed, lives were transformed, not by some magical miracle, but by realignment. And if it happened to them, it can happen to you. All it takes is one decision. And that decision starts with 3 practical steps you can take today. First, define your connection routine. Start your day by surrendering everything to God. Do it out loud. Declare it. Establish spiritual leadership for your journey as soon as you wake up. Second, examine your schedule. Remove everything that is not aligned with your values. Everything that takes up time but does not bear fruit. Everything that takes you away from God's presence, productivity, and peace. Third, be relentless with inconsistency. Every time you act contrary to what you believe, stop. Ask for forgiveness, recalibrate, correct your course. This is spiritual discipline. This is how consistency is built. And don't expect applause. Don't expect understanding from others. Because this transformation is yours. It's personal. It's profound. And in the beginning, only you will see it. But soon, the fruits will speak for you. People will notice something different. They will notice firmness in your voice, clarity in your eyes, direction in your actions, peace in your presence. Because those who walk with God carry order. And order attracts prosperity. And if you still have doubts, if you still feel that you are not capable, I tell you, you don't need to be capable. You need to be available. God will do the rest. The factory of your life is not bankrupt. It is just disorganized. And all disorganization can be solved with a good plan and disciplined execution. And now you have both. You have the plan. You have clarity. And you have the power to decide. So don't waste another minute. Stop looking for quick fixes. Stop running away from responsibility. Stop living as if it were random. You are structure. You are system. You are purpose. And when everything in you is spinning around the right center. The impossible will become just a step in the process. I end this mentoring as I began, with a simple, direct, and absolute truth. Put God first and watch your life fall into alignment. Now, share this video with someone who needs structure, not just motivation, direction, not just pretty words. And if you want to continue receiving this industrial mentoring for your mind, your faith, and your business, sign up, activate the bell. But above all, take action, because there's no point in following Henry Ford if you don't act like a builder. And no builder operates without a plan. God is your plan. And now, the rest is execution.